All right, so I did a count. It looks like we have most people that were in the waiting room. So for the sake of time, I will go ahead and get started. Welcome to today's program. My name is Jamie Roscoe, and I'm the treasurer of the AFP Western North Carolina board. And so today's session is led by Ryan Carpenter. And before we begin, I would like to take a moment to thank AFP WNC's 2021 sponsors, UNC Asheville, Western Carolina University, Community Foundation of Western North Carolina, AB Tech, the Community Foundation of Henderson County, and First Citizens Bank. And please mark your calendars for October 20th at 11:30. That will be our next monthly program, and Alex Comfort will present a session entitled The Ethical Challenges of All Positions in a Fundraising Shop, Annual Fund, Major Gifts, Grant Writer, Planned Giving, Director of Development, Event Specialist, and even Consultants. As a teaser, Alex is going to have a session about a true story that he's never told in Western North Carolina, and registration will open soon. So please register when you're able. And finally, registration for National Philanthropy Day is open. You can visit afpwnc.org/NPD to learn more and register. It is a virtual event again this year on November 17th at 11:30. The event is free, but registration is required. This year's honorees include Prestige Subaru and Horizon Heat and Air in the business category, Trisha Wilson in our Outstanding Philanthropist category, Eleanor Ashton will be recognized as Outstanding Fundraising Executive. Still Hui is our Outstanding Volunteer Fundraiser, and Dr. Joseph Fox will receive the Summit Award. And if you are interested, you can also make a gift right now to AFP's Be the Cause campaign in lieu of a ticket fee. So that is something that we're offering this year with NPD. And so now I will turn it over to Kelly to introduce both of our speakers. In addition to Ryan, we also have Leah Davenport. We are very grateful for both of you being here. Thank you so much.
I'm really glad to introduce Ryan Carpenter and Leah Davenport. And I'm actually, unfortunately, going to have to ask Leah to introduce herself a little bit to you guys. I did not get her bio before we started. Then I'm going to tell you a little bit about Ryan. He is the Director of Market Solutions at Pursuant. And prior to joining Pursuant, he spent some time at THD Inc., the nonprofit Year Up, and also with nonprofit software solutions company Cosmo. Ryan focuses on developing innovative strategies that efficiently identify, cultivate, and solicit donors and prospects through effective engagement strategies. Ryan likes working with large data sets to identify the underlying trends and points of importance. And Leah, I'm so sorry, but I'm going to ask you to just introduce yourself to us.
Oh, no worries. Thank you. I was a bit of a substitute in for this presentation, so we didn't necessarily have all those ducks in a row. But as Kelly said, my name is Leah Davenport, and my role here at Pursuant is as our senior marketing manager. So I'm more of the creative side of things. And actually, my background in fundraising is related with just serving with different organizations in a volunteer capacity. But a fun fact, I actually attended grad school in North Carolina at UNC Greensboro. So I did spend some time in North Carolina. I'm speaking to you from Texas today, and it's definitely a place that's very near and dear to my heart. So I'm really glad to be able to speak and present with you guys today.
Thank you, and take it away, Ryan.
All right, actually, thank you, Kelly, Jessica, for having us. I'm an AFP member up here in Massachusetts. So I love connecting with fellow members throughout the country, and glad to talk today about the topic of segmentation, which we'll get into, and Leah's going to kick things off for us. So thank you again, and Leah, hand it over to you.
All right, thank you so much. So we are excited to discuss today's topic on segmentation. Before we get started, we've just got one or two housekeeping notes just to help you make the most of your experience today. This recording will be shared with everyone after the presentation today. So if you need to drop early, you'll be able to get whatever you missed. We also are going to be leveraging some of the Zoom features that will be kind of make today's presentation more interactive. One of which is the poll feature. So we will have a poll question coming up here in a few minutes, as well as the raise your hand feature. So if you're not sure where those are, take a few seconds to look around your Zoom toolbar and make sure you know where those are. And as Kelly already introduced, Ryan and I work for Pursuant and in the client success and marketing capacities. And our agenda today is to discuss everything about segmentation and why it matters, why personalization is important, how is segmentation evolving, some different ways that you can practice segmentation to create more personalized donor experiences, as well as some Q&A to diagnose maybe some segmentation questions you have or frustrations you may be experiencing, and brainstorm some solutions for you. So the question at the heart of segmentation can kind of be thought of in one way. How can we find people who are most likely to give to us, and then pinpoint the messages and experiences that are most relevant to those motivations for giving to us? But if you think about it a different way, how does segmentation create donor loyalty? How do we connect with donors who feel deeply connected to our cause and deepen that connection so that they continue to give year after year? And I have a quick question for you before I kind of go into this slide. And it's just kind of a quick sort of audience poll, but raise your hand if you had a really strong fundraising year last year. All right, let me see if I can see how many hands are going up.
I see them popping up right now.
Yes, anyone give me a count?
I have 2 hands so far. 3.
All right, got some thumbs up coming in. And the reason we ask this question is simply because you may have a lot of new donors in your file who you are kind of wondering what engagement path to put them on. We saw statistically last year that donors in dollars were up by over 5% across the entire nonprofit space. And so if you experienced something along those lines, we just want to put in front of you that there are multiple different engagement paths that those people may want to engage with you through, and some of them may actually overlap. And so the kind of what I'd like to speak to on this slide is, with all these people that we have in our file who may be kind of at the beginning of your journey for you, instead of kind of waiting for them to opt into the journey, what if we actually use the data that we have about them and augmented that data to drive better decision-making about which engagement path to put them in?
Yeah, and I think just to touch on that before you move ahead, Leah,
Yep.
because we all had very successful years last year, particularly at end of year, and we're going to talk about how to capitalize at end of year in this discussion, but that leads to great opportunity. With all these new donors, why wait to just ask for the second gift? If we see there's value and there's affinity, maybe just hop ahead and have them join your giving society, or begin to personally reach out to them with a gift officer. So it's not, you can disrupt the typical flow of communications and the relationship you have with your donors if the data tells you the opportunities are there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely, Ryan. And so the point we're kind of working towards here is we're throwing around a lot of jargon here, and when it comes to personalization, segmentation. And so I wanted to kind of use a few examples to illustrate this before we go a little bit further. And when you look at these logos here on this slide, you can probably instantly think of some experiences that are highly, highly personal and customized to you that make you have a lot of loyalty and affinity for these brands. Our purchases, entertainment preferences, travel habits are being tracked in our user accounts. And these businesses use machine learning and artificial intelligence to guess what our next move is going to be. They use technology to anticipate our needs and deliver us opportunities to spend money before we even realize that we even want something. And so because an optimal experience is one that builds loyalty, this is something that we want to try and recreate in our donor experiences. If you're a happy Amazon Prime subscriber, you're probably not going to cancel that subscription because the convenience of 2-day free delivery has become such a part of the fabric of our lives and our expectations that it isn't something that we're really willing to give up or sever. So imagine if your nonprofit could do something even remotely approaching that. And the way that you actually do that is with data. And that's more data than simply a name, a phone number, a mailing address, and donation history. You need to know more than their net worth, their education, and their career. At the highest level, you need to start thinking about what it is that you need to know to deliver them an experience that makes your cause irresistible to them. We know that competition for donations will continue to be fierce as more and more different nonprofits enter the market with their unique solution to different problems. And so we need to start thinking about why your organization is most uniquely positioned to serve your cause, and why and what you need to know about your donors to be able to continue to drive that loyalty and those donations year after year. And so with that kind of preamble, we'd love to know just a little bit more about how are you currently segmenting your donor file? And we've got a poll set up for you that if I could go ahead and get that launched.
I gotcha.
Yep. And some of the option choices that we see here is RFM, so that's recency, frequency, and monetary. It's kind of a classic way of segmenting your file. You could also be looking at someone's highest previous contribution. All right, channel preference, I see one there. Life cycle stage is how long have they been with your organization, and what, along that journey, where are they? See wealth coming in. All right. We could go ahead and end that poll and share the results with everyone. So interesting mix of responses here. We do have sort of a small number of attendees, but Ryan, anything that you'd like to point out here?
Yeah, so life cycle stage, and what we mean by that is, what is the donor's giving relationship to you based on the current fiscal year? So just to be clear on that, we view life cycle for 2021. Are they a new donor, a second-year donor, a key multi-year donor? Did you just reactivate them, or did you reactivate them and it continued to give? And so if that's how you're viewing it, that's actually very interesting and a good step towards personalization and recognizing where these people are in their journey and their relationship with you. Channel preference, I'm interested to hear about that. We do a lot of work on channel preference. We don't silo, but certainly when we have targeted communications, we're going to make sure that we're reaching out to people through their preferred channel. So I'm really glad to see that. And just the general mix, RFM's not going anywhere. It works, and we'll talk a little bit about that, but we can do a lot more by, as I've seen several of you, incorporating demographics and wealth. So, and then for our all-star who's doing all of the above, kudos to you.
Yeah.
That's a great job. So really interesting, and I'm glad that you folks are doing this, because I think this will resonate more with you as we go throughout.
Excellent.
All right.
All right, Ryan, over to you.
Yeah, so why does segmentation matter? And look, we have a number of case studies showing how personalization is effective in increasing engagement and giving. And some of you, based on those results, you've found the same. It really works, and it's not hard to do. And you can really just begin by looking at your own database or CRM. And so really the heart of it, personalized communication. And those are things as simple as by incorporating the variable for the name, right? But it goes so much more beyond that. And when you do personalize and provide donor recognition, think about the story itself. What are you telling them? If you're not making them the hero, I think you're doing yourself a bit of a disservice. So when you talk about a great story, some outcomes that you've had over the last year that get people excited to continue to support you, make sure you're incorporating that it's because of them, right? It's not the organization did this. The organization was able to do this through your support. So thank you, Leah. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Kelly. Try to personalize it as much as you can. And why? Because it does lead to greater engagement. Greater engagement, just by, if you're personalizing something, people are more likely to open the email if it has their name included, or to continue reading a message if you're talking about some programmatic work that they care about, not just a blanket control package that's going out that's talking about what you want to talk about. But if you have 5, 10 different programs and you understand that a person cares more so about one than the other, talk about the one they care about. That is going to resonate more, create more engagement. And really, at the end of the day, by increasing engagement, you are strengthening a relationship. You're strengthening a relationship, and that's going to lead to greater loyalty, which includes greater giving and more frequent giving. But I think we should really just start, for those of you that are still wondering, well, what exactly are we talking about segmentation? Let's talk a little bit about that. It's really about grouping based on similarities. And, typically people are going to categorize by giving level, right? RFM, I have my under 100 actives, my over 250 lapsed donors. Those are all very common, ways to segment. But in today's day and age, you can think about personalizing based on attributes, both what you find in your database, what do you know about them, as well as what's out there. Gone are the days of just having wealth scores. Wealth scores only tell part of the story. We can now understand what people are interested in, what their life is like, their demographics. Are they married? Do they have kids? Are they have higher ed degrees? Their giving affinities. So if I know somebody's wealthy, but they don't give anywhere, well, they're going to max out a lot earlier in their giving potential. But if you understand somebody does have capacity and they're giving elsewhere and they're giving to similar causes to your own, that's some real value that's going to be building. That's our understanding their value. And then segment based on things like location. I worked with a large national organization that would incorporate variable stats on the state or the country that their constituents were in. And if you're more local in North Carolina, think about it from the county or the town level, if possible. And so I've mentioned it a few times already, but the old way of doing it, it's historically how we've all segmented our donors for mailings and other communications, RFM, recency of giving, frequency of giving, and the monetary value of giving. I am not here to tell you that to stop doing that. This works, right? If we're going to talk to people based on the giving level and the giving recency and the amount, that has shown to work historically. So all my active mid-level donors that are giving us over $1,000 a year, they're maybe going to get a more business-like message than my lapsed donors that are giving under $1,000 a year, where you're maybe going to pull at their heartstrings more. And so continue to do that because it's useful, but there's so much more that you can do now. And as Leah mentioned, people are accustomed to being communicated with on a more personal level based on segmentation. So don't be afraid to use the information that's out there to then inform on what you want to, how you want to talk to somebody, or let on that them. Because actually people feel good about having that personalization. That leads to them to want to read your message and want to open email. So if you want to go to the next slide, as I said, continue the old way. It's still useful to segment your donors by giving level and recency. But today there's so much external data, third-party data that goes beyond wealth to help you understand who your people are and what they care about. You can even understand their channel preferences to know what's the best channel to reach them through, or when making budgeting decisions on mail, you can recognize who really doesn't respond to mail and reduce that amount. That'll lower your costs and increase ROI. It's really extensive. And by taking this information and incorporating in the message that you want to talk about through the channel that's most likely to see a response, you are going to have a significantly greater ROI. But there are some questions that you want to ask. If you want to go to the next slide. And so questions to consider. And so I like to start with, well, what is the goal? What's the strategy that I have for a mailing, an email, an invite to an event? Start there. And then ask yourself demographic information. Maybe you have it, maybe you don't. Well, does it matter? Does it matter to you if you know how old people are? Because maybe you're thinking about a planned giving prospect message. It's not going to do much to just send out, a mailing to everybody on your file and have, a little checkbox on the bottom of the return envelope saying I'm interested in planned giving. It's going to get lost in the mix. But if you know people, if you know that somebody is over 50 years old, and perhaps they don't have any children, that's the type of demographic information that could be useful to target a message about planned giving prospecting, as an example. Also, how are your donors connected to you and each other? Do they give to you through a specific channel? And that's likely the channel that is most likely to see them open. We also have some additional outside information that can inform on you what a person's true channel preferences, not just based on what they, how they communicate with you. Also, and this is really important because of what we saw in 2020, why did they give? Was it because it was a standard acquisition package? Was it a peer-to-peer ask and maybe they gave because their Aunt Sue asked them to? Or was it an emergency situation, right? A lot of us did receive new donors last year, but I'm really concerned with how many of them gave because it was a disaster type situation where they needed to help food banks, they needed to help hospitals, they needed to help animal welfare organizations, or was it because they actually have an affinity for those types of causes? So understanding those things are going to help you craft a segment to then communicate with more effectively. And also about their giving. Many of you probably have been exposed to external giving data, where else people are giving, what types of causes are they giving to. With our clients, we often want to look at, your donors and even your non-donors. Where else are they giving? Are they giving to similar causes? Are you a priority that you can blend with all the additional information on wealth and capacity, that this is actually a priority for them and then they could really realistically be a major donor? Or do you see that they're giving largely to other causes? And maybe you're just not that high of a priority for them. So recognizing really where you stand is important. And also the channels I've mentioned, how they came onto file, but also understanding, and we see a lot of organizations, they say, well, look, we have these event donors. We don't know what to do with them. We didn't have any events in 2020. 2021, we had one event, not that many people attended. And so that whole revenue stream kind of comes to a close or is diminished greatly. But what we found is there's a lot of event donors that do have a preference for digital. They do have a preference for mail. And it's just recognizing where that channel preference is to then communicate with them through those channels to continue that bond and continue that relationship and continue them to support you. And when you think about virtual, the proliferation of virtual channels is extensive and it can be intimidating. I would say a couple things as an aside with virtual. Try to be consistent with your messaging and your branding throughout all channels. When you're talking about one topic through Facebook, do the same through email, because these people, they're very likely could see all of those virtual digital offers, and it could be confusing if it's not a consistent message. You want to make sure that they see your name and your brand and recognize what you're doing. But it's also important to know if they did come on through email or are they active on social. We have Giving Tuesday coming up, at the end of November, and those people that are active on social, that's going to be important to understand. All right, so what I'd like to do is we're going to do a few things. We're going to take a look at some real strategies our clients have recently enacted and the positive results which followed. And then I want to turn it over and I want to kind of walk through a few key strategies at year end. Do so through our Giving DNA platform, but it could give you ideas of using the current tools you have, or really just starting with what's on your database, but really crucial segments. So Leah, if you want to jump to the next one, I just want to focus a couple on direct mail. And so we are working with a small religious organization actually up in Virginia, and they were unable to pull their lapsed donors out of their database to include in their mailings. Now, that was a problem because their lapsed donors, they want to communicate with the 13 through 36-month lapsed donors, but they version differently. So when they migrated from one CRM to another last year, they were unable to effectively pull those donors out. They began working with us. They were then since able to identify all of their lapsed donors. And in 2021, they reactivated over 1,000 of them. And as of July 31st, that was led to a realization of $622,000 in revenue. So if you are not communicating with your lapsed donors, I would suggest doing so. If there's budgetary constraints, look at your lapsed donors that have actively giving elsewhere, that have an affinity to support your type of cause, or those that are most likely to communicate through either mail or email, or if you have a telemarketing campaign as you approach year end. The next one, we were working with a Midwest university. And so student athletes were kneeling during the national anthem. This is last football season, 2020, and it was a really hot topic in the area. Again, not too far from you folks over in Tennessee. They had their largest annual campaign of the year coming up, and they wanted to effectively speak to people based on their lifestyle and beliefs. And so what happened was they said, all right, I want to speak to people that support patriotism and veterans. I also want to understand who is more liberal, who is more interested in equity and diversity. And so we were able to, and I want to kind of highlight this because this is going to speak to the type of information that's available to you today to segment. And so we looked at those that they considered to be patriotic or more leaning towards supporting veterans. And so we were able to look at political parties. Typically, we found Republicans, they're more conservative. We also looked at the donors on file that were registered Republicans that were either supporting veteran causes or they were living with a vet in their home, either themselves or a spouse or a child. And so that group, they received one type of message when they were going out for their large Giving Day campaign. And it did address the kneeling because it was a huge topic in the news for a couple months at the time. Conversely, we looked at a more liberal group, people that were supporting liberal politics. They were either independent or Democratic. They were supporting social services. And so we couldn't identify everybody because you're never going to gather insights on your whole file. People move, they pass away, they change their name when they get married. But we were able to identify a sizable group and then determine whether they were more leaning towards diversity, equity, equality, or conservatism, patriotism, and veterans causes. And based on that, they were able to raise 83% more year over year. Now, they had a huge challenge, and they were concerned that they were going to lose a significant amount of revenue because they didn't know how to talk to these people. They didn't know who they were going to offend or how they were going to provide the right message. So by using this external data, they were able to identify folks based on what they thought would be the right message for them. And not only did they retain, they raised 83%, almost twice as much year over year. And so those are kind of some examples to get you thinking about how you can effectively segment, from as simple as looking at lapsed donors and making sure you're targeting them and communicating with them, to the sophistication of creating segments for various versions for your appeals. It really does matter. And not to just talk about mail, although mail is very, very important, think about it through other channels. And so we were working with a large national arts and culture organization. They wanted to enhance their mid-level program with personal engagement. However, like many that are interested in mid-level, and that's my background for over a decade, mid-level fundraising, it's not like you can treat it like a major gift portfolio. Mid-level's huge. So they wanted to know, how do we prioritize who to connect with? And so what we were able to do is prioritize their mid-level based on external giving, affinity, who is giving to a similar type of arts and culture organizations outside of their own. So we have greater share of wallet, affinity for that type of cause. And then we layered in those that had a preference to communicate over the phone. And so what that led to was a higher connection rate. It's not on there, but we were able to connect with 40% more people on the phone year over year. So they're able to get in front of the people and actually speak to them personally. And we found that those that they were able to personally connect with gave twice as much as those that were not connected with. And year over year, revenue increased 59%. And so taking a step further, if you are going to do any year-end telemarketing campaigns, look at those. Now, we have channel preferences that I can show you in a moment, but if you don't have those insights, look at how people have been giving to you and engaging to you. And if you see people that have actively given or picked up the phone in the past, double down on them, because many telemarketing campaigns, if you're working with an outside source, they're just going to run through that list, call everybody 2 or 3 times over the course of a week. But if you ask them, say, hey, this 20% of people, double down on them, because I know that they are able to be reached on this channel. They've given through here before. That can increase the number of responses that are positive. All right, and so in a minute, I'm just going to jump into our platform to go over a few examples that highlight end of year giving. But I just want to start by saying with segmentation, it's critical to use external data to effectively recognize meaningful segments on your file. So if you don't have access to that, you can begin by using your own database. As I had mentioned, recognizing where people are making gifts, what channels they're giving through, have they engaged with you through volunteer efforts, advocacy efforts. Use any of that information you can to understand what their interests are and what their ultimate value is. But that being said, having access to the plethora of third-party data and donor insights is really critical to help you. And the ROI is significant. Again, you can go to our website, and it's not just us. You can see the benefit of by using external data to help you segment donors. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen just to walk through a couple things here.
Ryan, as you're getting that pulled up, something that occurred to me as we were doing our presentation is it might be helpful for some folks to just do a very, very high level introduction to differences between zero first party and third party data, that we were kind of all operating from the same vocabulary here.
Yeah, I mean, zero and first party are more or less the same. It's direct from your donor to you, right? So any information on your database that you've received from your donor through a survey or through some other response on communication, that would be zero or first party. It's a real subtle difference. Third party data is effectively information that you are gathering from external sources. And there's a variety of that. There's obviously a big in the news, third party data for digital communications. Google's going to discontinue that, although that's kind of like a market share play because they have some other ability to provide external data. That's kind of like when you send out an email and you can then track somebody online, so you can have your ad target them when they go onto a various websites. There's also third-party data that you can purchase. So you can purchase third-party data through the Giving DNA platform, or Blackbaud has it, Wealth Engine. That's other data that comes from not only digital sources, but publicly available information, right? That's licensed information. So where people are politically registered, where they're making gifts because they have 990s and annual reports that are available to them that they then distribute to their users. And so with that said, I wanted to talk a little bit about what are some of the things you can think about as we approach the end of the year. And I'm just going to jump over to the constituents page. First, I would say most of us probably have non-donors on file, right? All the clients we work with, we have dozens of them, and they always have this sizable portion of non-donors. And it's through a combination of things. Maybe it's people that came on through program, maybe it's volunteers, maybe it's an acquisition list that you purchased years ago. I would take a look at those non-donors, and maybe you're already soliciting them. And if it's just a general kind of blanketed communication with a soft ask, as many do to non-donors, I think you can do a little bit better. And what we prescribe and we're doing for our clients is we're looking at their non-donors. And then what we're going to do is look at the non-donors that are actively giving elsewhere. And I'm telling you, so you can see here, I have this is actual data, 7,400, 6,900. These non-donors on file are giving somewhere else. And I got to tell you, doesn't matter who we look at, which client we're working with, it's always a sizable population of the non-donors that are on their constituents file are actively giving elsewhere. And I would imagine the same goes for you as well. And so recognize which of your non-donors on file are giving elsewhere. And if you can, understand if they're giving to similar causes to you. If you are a cause that supports children, these are people that you should be asking for a gift very pointedly to support you at this end of the year. Now, you want to include a compelling story, but have the confidence that these people are philanthropic, they do have the means and the ability to give to you. Perhaps you haven't asked them before, or perhaps the ask wasn't compelling enough. But I would look at those non-donors, and it's the giving season coming up in the next couple of months. If they're going to open their checkbooks and pull out their credit card, this is the time they're going to do it. So consider that. Next, Giving Tuesday. Many of you are probably having Giving Tuesday campaigns. One thing that really works well, and you don't have to have any external data available, although that does support it, is to ask your constituents to share your social media posts. Send them an email and ask them. In our case, and some of you may have social IQ scores, there's a lot of them out there. We have them as well. And so what we've been identifying are individuals on file that are active all the way up to influencers. They have a large following. They have a lot of likes, retweets, shares. Emailing them directly, not asking them for a gift, but when you have your Giving Tuesday social links available, send them out and just ask them to share that. If they are actively on social and they're on your file, maybe you want to make sure it's only donors, they're likely going to share. And that's going to expose you to an audience that you didn't have access to before. A couple of years back, we were working with Mothers Against Drunk Driving. They were the first client to do this with us, and they had significant increase in Giving Tuesday. It boosted by like 72% or so. They acquired a lot of names, and many of the people that they asked to just share that, they ended up giving as well too. So, you don't ask outright, but ask them to share, and they're inherently going to consider making a gift as well. So keep that in mind for Giving Tuesday. Another one, my favorite, near and dear to me, is looking at your mid-level donors. I'm just going to clear this out. And so let's say in this example, mid-level is 1,000 to 10,000. And I like to make sure I'm cultivating and stewarding mid-level at the end of the year. And so thinking about, you may have a Thanksgiving card that goes out in November. Identify your mid-level donors. And again, if you have a sizable portion of them, prioritize them. Who's giving the most? If you have third-party data indicating who's the wealthiest, however many you can tackle, make sure you're personally thanking them. Include them in your direct marketing. They may get that thank you, that Thanksgiving, that holiday card. That's great. But in early November, if you are calling them and personally thanking them all the way up through the end of November, I've heard it time and time again. They are shocked and surprised and very happy to get that call. I've had donors tell me, I can't believe you're not asking me for something. That's going to come, right? But on that call, they can't believe they're not getting asked. Have just a deluge of mail and email and telemarketing. That stands out. And if you're doing that with your mid and extend it up to your major donors as well, that's going to pay off at year end. They are going to feel the appreciation from you. So I would make sure that you are targeting those mid and major donors for pure cultivation and stewardship sometime from late October up through November. That will pay off for you. Another group to look at, because we had so many new donors come on file, I would take a long look at our new donors. And we do it like this. We have life cycle. And to the point Leah had made early on, disrupting the typical path. Now, again, many of the organizations we've worked with and seen industry-wide, they had a boost in new donors. We actually work with Second Harvest of Middle Tennessee, and they received 10,000 new donors last year. They're part of the Feeding America Food Bank, which they just blew up all those food banks last year. And so they began basically identifying which of those new donors had the highest value, that actually had an affinity and weren't giving kind of in a disaster-related situation. And so they just basically looked at their new donors that had high level of income. I think it was like over 150K. And that were also giving to other causes, that had a affinity to support social services. They dropped a couple hundred of them into portfolios. They had hired a new gift officer. Their major giving practice year over year increased 69% in revenue. And a lot of those were new donors being populated, not all of them, but they were pulling out legacy donors that hadn't given really significantly. And we're able to drop in a lot of new donors that were ready to make that jump. They came on file, maybe gave $100, maybe gave $500, but they were ready to give significantly and make gifts over $5,000 in this case. So look at your new donors. And then lastly, I would want to look at lapsed donors. And so you may be, however you're communicating with lapsed, take a look at the group beyond what you typically mail or email. Look at those deep lapsed, because there is going to be a portion of them that are still giving, and they still have an affinity for your type of cause. And so if you're mailing your 0 to 24 month, take a look at those that haven't made a gift in 25 to 48 months. And so go right here, say September, August, because of those, and again, there's a lot of different sources out there. Look at those deep laps that are actively giving elsewhere, and look at those that have an affinity to support your cause. Maybe, you know, some of those on the call today, your religious causes. And really just take a chance on that. You can't, there's deep laps typically don't get mailed because it costs money. But as we're here at the end of the year, key time for giving, recognizing which of those deep laps on your file are actively giving and maybe giving to similar causes, that's going to give you the best shot at ROI. And it's almost like, you know, acquisition without having to purchase an acquisition list, similar to those non-donors. And if you want, look at where they gave before. What were the channels that they were giving through? You know, if you want to do a mailing, make sure that you look at those deep lapsed. Well, half of them gave through mail. Those are the ones that you maybe want to give another shot at mail again, even though it's been a few years since they gave. And so those are just a few of the segments that you want to consider. Oh, and also, before I close, sustainers. The best way to keep your donor is to have them giving on a regular basis, right? And so we identify sustainers for our clients, but a good way for you to identify your best sustainer prospects and lead with the message, right? Don't put it on the return envelope, just a checkbox and say, I want this gift to be monthly. Ask for that monthly support. Look at the donors that have been giving to you for 3+ years straight, your key multi-year donors. And of those, which of those donors are giving more year over year over year? Maybe they started at $50. Last year they gave 75. This year they gave 100 and they gave 2 gifts. Those are the ones that are showing you all the signs that they will give monthly if you ask them to do so. And once they begin giving monthly, the likelihood of retaining them significantly increases. I will say to caution you, 90 days is typically where the biggest drop off is after a few months. So that's something to keep in mind. But by and large, converting one-time annual donors into monthly donors is going to increase your retention rates. So with that, I'm just going to stop my share and transition over to the slide. Oh, there we go. Thanks, Leah. Just another story to talk about the segmentation. This one is a little bit of a one-off, but just think about the possibilities. We were working with an animal welfare shop in Houston, and Houston, very wealthy area. They'd been around for a number of years, but they never had a major gift practice until now. And they identified all their donors that had given $500 to $2,500 a year, but no more. They layered in some wealth and they layered in some giving. And then lastly, those most likely to prefer email, sent out an email, just cultivating, right? Again, just cultivating, trying to strengthen the relationship, letting them know what they've been doing thanks to their support. First email to go out, and it was coming from the director of leadership gifts. They got a response. The donor had been on file for 25 years. He said, I want to write a check for $100,000. That's incredible. It's crazy, but it happened. And it happened 4 more times. If you go to the next slide, it wasn't 2 gifts of $100,000. It was 5 gifts from 4 families. And so that's just the power of using information and then targeting a communication to these people, rather than just, you know, these people could have sat endlessly in direct response, gotten the same email time and again with the story that's a little saccharine, and then asking them with their gift ask array, hey, $100, $250, $500. What they did is they kept them in direct response, but they also had this group of about 450, 500 people. They were sending out personalized messages to cultivate and steward because they knew they had the greatest potential. And gosh, I can't tell you I expected that on the first email, but that was great. But then it followed. It wasn't some outlier. They had 4 more gifts of $100,000 come in over a 6-month period to end 2020. It was really significant. And we were talking a lot about segmentation, largely for direct response. We are actually adding some major giving dashboards, kind of give you information like this picture of the woman on the right telling you who she is, what she cares about, her average gift to your organization, and et cetera. Also help you understand how your gift officers are performing. So more to come on that. But I would just like to close out by kind of giving you some action steps to take from this call and making your moves. And it really starts with mapping the giving DNA of your donors, understanding what your donors care about. What are they interested in? And how can you align that with your own mission? And so just to take it back to when I was going over the examples, think about the programmatic work you do. If you have access to external giving data, see what your constituents are giving to. And based on the causes they are giving to, let's say you are a health cause. Well, if somebody's giving to children's causes, do you have anything health related about kids in particular versus work you're doing on blood cancer research? Or perhaps they give to veterans. Are you doing anything to support PTSD and support those that have it? Think of things like that. Or if you understand that people have children living at home with them, talk to them as a parent. So understand who these people are, and then segment based on the top interests and affinities that bubble up. And that can lead to different segmentations. But also consider the strategy. Are you trying to upgrade? Are you trying to convert to monthly donors? Are you trying to reactivate? That all goes into the message, the story that you're telling. And that story should always put the donor up front and make them the hero, make them feel good about supporting you, that allows you to do the work that you do. But it's because of them. So certainly keep that in mind. And then lastly, don't be afraid to disrupt where appropriate. In my example, if new donors came on file and they have a high value, create a strategy to upgrade them quicker than usual. We had that example I just showed you from the Houston SPCA, where they were targeting donors that were just giving at the mid-level. Some were new, some were for many years. They decided to, you know what, in addition to the direct response email and mail they get, we want to send them something special because we see that they have a level of affinity and wealth and they prefer digital, so I'm going to email them. Don't be afraid to disrupt that, and also track performance, optimize along the way.
Thank you so much, Ryan. We have a free resource we'd like to share with you. But before I do, I just wanted to kind of reiterate something. Ryan's kind of wrap up here inspired me a little bit. But if we kind of go back to this slide and remember that if you can begin to start thinking of yourself at year end as a data company and start to think about ways that you can ask your donors more questions, create experiences designed to for there to be opportunities along the way for donors to tell you more about them and how they'd like to engage with you further. Year end is a great time to ask if people would be interested in making a monthly gift and upgrading their commitment to you in 2022. And so just want to kind of leave you with that little nugget to think about as we close here today. But as we mentioned, we've got a free resource for you all around segmentation. And you can download that at pursuant.com/segmentation1. And that is actually the first in a series about segmentation. But that one kind of sets the stage around segmentation and puts in some best practices around it that you can start to think about as you have this opportunity at year end to gather some new and fresh data about your donors that can help you put in place better strategies and more effective strategies in 2022. And then one final link here for you today before we get into our Q&A time. I want to be respectful of your time. But if you would like to get more of a personalized tour of Giving DNA, that was the technology that Ryan previewed for you. You can use that QR code or go to givingdna.pursuant.com/demo. And you can sign up for 30 minutes just to explain some of your pain points and see if there are answers or strategies that Giving DNA can help resource you with. And without any further ado, I would love to just kind of open it up for questions or anything we'd like to go back and restate for you if we went too quickly and you missed it. Ryan, any final thoughts as I go ahead and pull up our questions?
Yeah, I would just say, if I wasn't clear enough, this is like the most exciting time of year. It's also the most important time of year. So if you're joining this call, you are thinking about how can I segment, and you want to segment because you're coming up on the end of year. And so I would really look to identify the opportunities on your file. Who are those that you can reactivate? Who are those that you can convert? Look at your non-donor file. And if you have any indication, be either internally on your CRM or externally, that these people are giving, they have a share of wallet that you can obtain, ask them and make it direct. Segmentation is all about allowing you to have a targeted message. So it's not a watered down ask that will appeal to everybody. You can understand that these people care about something specific, so go ahead and be bold, or they are actively giving elsewhere. If they're not supporting you, they're not going to be offended by being asked. So keep that in mind. Where are the opportunities on your file? Or come at it from the other perspective and say, I have this goal or objective. We need to increase our monthly donor file by 30%. Okay, well, let's identify those that are most likely to support on a monthly recurring basis. And you can do that again. The best way is to recognize all the external data available to you, but you can at the very least begin to see what the giving trends have been to your organization. Look at those people that are key multi-year donors that have increased their giving, not decreased their giving over the last 3 years or so. Those are the ones that you want to lead with the ask to support, and why it would be important and why you'd appreciate it. So I'm glad to talk to anybody one-off. You can reach out to us about your objectives, strategies, questions, after this call.
All right, I will go back. We've got a raised hand. So Angela, do you have a question for us?
You're on mute, Angela.
Thanks, Ben. I'm going back and forth between screens, so good to know. So thank you all for this information. It's very helpful and well-timed. And I also was checking the resource you all suggested, and it's not coming up for me. That's where I was going back and forth between screens to see if I'm entering it incorrectly or if there's another way to get there.
Yes, let's see.
I will drop the link into here.
Yes, maybe we can put the link directly into the chat for everybody.
Thank you. I may have just mistyped it. Yeah.
Nope.
Got it. Thank you.
Sure thing.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else, Leah? Any questions pop up before we close?
We did have one question, Ryan, about the channel preferences. I think you did cover it when you were in the platform, but maybe one more quick explanation about how to identify channel preferences would be helpful.
Sure. And it's funny, before I had access to Giving DNA and I was part of the team that built it, I was developing channel preference tracks based on the channel they were giving through. Very simple, but you can identify trends. So if you see that somebody's continually giving online, well, by gosh, that's where you're going to want to communicate the message to them. And so as you approach year end, you don't have to segment silo, but make sure you are including people in the channel that we see they prefer. And so just by beginning on your database, looking at how they're giving to you, and whatever the most common channel is, make sure they are included in that communication. Because really, at the end of the day, it's all about transactions, channel preferences. We understand channel preference on our platform through transactions. That's purchases and gift making. And I've shared a couple examples with you how we were able to increase connection rates, email responses, and it's all through those transactions. So while if you don't have access to data that's third party, you can begin with your own file and just see how people are giving to you, right? And so if there's people that are only giving online, maybe there's some attribution through a link on a mailing that they're just always going to online, but that's very unlikely. So recognize how people have communicated with you in the past, and that's a good start to identify channel preferences.
And just to follow that up, Ryan, something to also keep in mind when it comes to channel preferences is that's a description of where they prefer to transact or give. But we all know that in our own day-to-day lives, when we interact with marketing and advertising and different sorts of messages, that a lot of times it can take multiple times of experiencing something before you actually engage and transact. So for example, using an e-commerce example, you might see an ad on Facebook and then you see that same ad on Instagram. Maybe you visit the website and then that ad follows you around. That's sort of a digital version. Another way is you could see a billboard as you're driving down, if for a local nonprofit, and then you see an ad for that nonprofit on social media. But then you may decide to pull out your checkbook, write a check, and put it in the mail. And so just as you're thinking about designing those year-end experiences, keep in mind that oftentimes stats say it can take 7 or more touches before someone will actually make a gift to you. So don't necessarily consider channel preferences as the end all be all of where you should be doing all of your messaging. Definitely. All right, Ryan. Well, I think we are at the end of our time today. And so do I turn things back over to you, Kelly?
Or Jamie?
Yeah, sure. I can take over. And since we have just 2 more minutes, Doug, did you get your question answered that you put in the chat? And if not, would you like to ask it?
Let me restate the question, and thank you for asking.
Sure.
I think, what my question was is, how do you know if donors prefer to be communicated by phone? I feel like the description that you were explaining was more about their giving preference, either by phone or by online via a computer or other resource. So I thought I heard, maybe mistakenly, that you actually knew which supporters would prefer to be communicated to by phone.
Yeah, no, we do. And again, it's based on transactional behavior, how they're buying things and how they're giving. And I will say, when I first heard that, I thought, I was a little skeptical. I said, well, gee, that doesn't mean they prefer it. But when we talk about preference, we're talking about likelihood of engaging through that channel. And what we're finding is people that are transacting through channels such as phone are more likely to be connected with, right? And so if you can connect with them there, that's the half the battle, just getting somebody's attention, getting to open an email, pick up a phone, respond to a mailing. And so if you can connect with them, well, then you have to have the story to back it up. But in this day and age, and I've managed call programs before, you can go an hour, 2 hours picking up the phone, disconnection, voicemail. It's really demoralizing. And so if you can understand that these people are transacting on the phone, they're going to be more likely to pick up the phone, and that's half the battle. And we have a number of case studies that support that where connection rates are increasing. That's not to say that everybody who is transacting online just loves chatting on the phone, but that's a channel that they are engaging through and transacting through, and thus the preference.
May I ask a follow-up?
Yeah.
I'm hearing, and this is more anecdotal than factual, but I'm hearing that more people are not picking up their phone because of the enormous amount of telemarketing and other calls that are coming through. People just don't answer their phone, or sometimes are suspicious of a phone call and would prefer, a text or some other. Are you finding any data that suggests that is accurate?
No, actually, I haven't. Not to say that's not happened, but we're finding that the opposite. Well, we were. Telemarketing campaigns are actually increasing throughout 2020, and still today in 2021, more people are home. I'm working from my house. I'm likely to have the phone now. Do I pick it up? I don't know. That's me. I may not. But more people are accessible by the phone than they were in years past. That may wane over time, but you can still identify the subset that will pick up the phone by understanding how are they giving to you? Have they responded to telemarketing campaigns in the past? Have they called based on a DRTV ad? Those are things that you can begin to use. And I would say, by and large, it remains to be seen if telemarketing is kind of waning yet again, but there are still people that are going to be the ones you can communicate through that channel.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Great. Well, thank you so much to Ryan and Leah. That was very interesting. And thank you to all of our participants for your time. And don't forget to sign up for our next monthly session and/or NPD at afpwnc.org. And I hope that everyone has a great, productive day.
Thanks now. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.